Welcome to Real Booked with Lindsey and Bea, where we reflect on the parallels between bestsellers and blockbusters for laughs and social disruption. I'm Bea Jordan of BlueCouchLibrary.com, and I read the book.
And I'm Lindsey Howie of MyRelationshipWin.com, and I watched the movie.
Hi, Lindsey.
Hi, Bea.
How are you?
I am excited. How are you?
I'm good.
That's good. Oh, I just finished watching the Steven Spielberg version of the BFG that he put out in 2016.
Cool. I just finished reading the Roald Dahl book, the BFG, which was written in 1982.
82.
Yeah.
2016.
Okay.
Yeah. This was the kind of story that I really want to be able to, like, just immerse myself in, because it was, like, fanciful and fiction and adventurous, and, the main character is a girl, and I'm like, oh my god, these things usually don't all, like, intersect in this way.
Uh-huh.
But then there was a lot of it where, once you step back, you're like, oh, what? Okay, that just happened.
Yeah?
There's a lot to process.
So let me start by saying that I don't really care for Roald Dahl very much. I've not read anything that he's written and been like, oh yes, but I also didn't read anything he wrote when I was a child, so I am a bit out of his target market at this point in time.
I had an experience in grade school where one of the teachers would read to a large group of 3 or 4 classrooms worth of kids, and so we all gathered and were read to. This book specifically sticks out for me, so there's a frame of reference there that
Right.
I really enjoy. I really enjoyed seeing the movie
Because you've got the
because
nostalgia.
I have that layer of nostalgia there.
The fondness.
Yes. Yes, but it's been a long time since grade school, so
Yeah.
there was the fondness feels misplaced at this point.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised that they read this book out loud to us, because the movie was interesting, so I can only imagine how the actual book is.
Right, so I tried to read it out loud to Everett, probably in the last year or two. So at some point when he was maybe 6 or 7, we tried to read it out loud, and he was like, Probably because my reading of it was super lackluster, because the Giants' made-up words they're fun visually, but then Sophie keeps trying to correct him, and it sounds like arguing with a toddler, and it's really frustrating to do out loud. It was not fun for me to read it out loud. I wasn't enjoying it, so he also wasn't really enjoying it, and we gave up on it a couple chapters in. It wasn't fun.
It was not fun for Sophie either to be correcting this very large kidnapper, right?
Oh my god, thank you for saying that. So many fond relationships in children's stories begin with abduction. What the hell, man?
I mean, she was at an orphanage, so that is supposed to make it null and void, right?
Right.
So
no.
Orphans
are unwanted. That's why the orphanage lady was allowed to put them in a dark closet to the Pokey, because that's the only Roald Dahl adaptation or anything that I have a positive experience with is Matilda, right?
Yeah.
So it's the Trunchbull with the Pokey
was
referenced in this sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's
well, no, but that's a theme, and it's that is
adults
that's
being
a control
awful.
mechanism that we built into our children's entertainment, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, but it's also Harry Potter Under the Stairs, right? So it's a part of.
That's actually one of my notes. I bet J.K. Rowling read a lot of Roald Dahl. There's something that I can't quite put my finger on. It's something in the wordplay or the just general cadence of the language. Something is very similar between the two of them.
I agree 100%. I even think that the concept of dreams, right, and the way that the BFG was magicking them up was very much in that vein of natural mysticism, right? That's the...
It would fit.
Yeah.
With that storytelling style. The themes are similar for sure. The main character that has just this dire circumstance is punitively put into a dark place alone. Oh God, poor Sophie.
Yes. Oh my God, poor Sophie. To be like, what, 8 and have insomnia because of all of your trauma? Like, yeah.
No,
Let's
it's fine.
not.
She's fine. She's got a giant now.
He's her best friend. And look, she ended up meeting the queen.
The queen!
Who saved the day by abducting all of the giants?
Yes, and then putting them into a big pit. I don't know what the movie did with them.
Oh, they dumped in the ocean.
Ooh, that's a bit darker.
That's way more genocidal maniac, but also the queen!
That makes sense, doesn't it? So, okay, I want to talk a little bit about racism in children's literature and just break everybody's heart.
Okay.
So, I use a literature-based curriculum with my son. We homeschool. And so homeschoolers tend to prefer classic literature. I think that there's a little bit of an elitist mentality sometimes with the classic literature preference. And that's fine. I love old books. I love classics. But I was going through some books with Everett and going, oh my goodness, there's so much blatant racism and more subtle, like, racist coding in these books that I have to stop and talk about with him. That's part of the reason that I wanted to start my blog, was to be able to talk about it a little bit and just pick it apart. And I'm not condemning these books because they're a product of their time and they're not inherently invaluable because they have flaws. But let's talk about how these giants were depicted as horrible, savage, beastly killers with their tanned brown skin, and he described them as having like a loincloth type, improperly clothed, and there's a lot of blatant racist coding there.
So funny story, in the movie they're kind of dressed like Scottish people. So if you look at European history, right, and you look at how they wanted to dominate Scotland, like it's very much racist coding. It very much continues in the depiction, both from the 80s and
2016 or whatever it was. Yeah.
I mean, the layer is definitely there.
So again, I don't want to tell anybody that you're not allowed to enjoy this with your kids or just for yourself because you enjoyed it as a kid, whatever. I know, like, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is another Roald Dahl book that has similar issues with the Oompa Loompas were actually described in the original version of the book as like a tribe of an African tribe that was abducted and then agreed to stay on. They cleaned it up in a later version and made it like, no, they were invited and it was mutual.
Right.
But it was, that's pretty.
Assimilate or die is not actually a choice.
No.
Like, I don't know who needs to hear that, like, just blatantly said out loud, but that's, not a real choose.
So, again, my solution isn't wipe this off of the...
No, I love your solution. You started your blog. You are actively dismantling these things within your own family unit. And you're writing a different style of curriculum to be able to engage with these books in a way that makes having that conversation easier and fun. And, like, that's why I love this sphere of influence that you're trying to work in right now, because it works on all of those levels.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's amazing. That's why I like having these discussions, too, about I had that childhood nostalgia for this material. Mm-hmm. So to be able to see this now and as an adult in a form that, like, Spielberg directed this movie, like, they threw so much money to create this, and it was fanciful and beautiful, and you felt all of the things, and it was a good story, but it's still racist AF.
Yeah!
You still have to take a look at the fact that, like, the white savior is literally the Queen of England, who then goes and, like, totally takes these very Scottish-looking giants and dumps them into the ocean to, like, inhabit then this, like, island that is just, like, a big rock, basically. And they dump all of the, not cucumber, but
Snozcumbers. Yeah.
Snozcumbers.
Okay, so that was in both versions. Then,
Yeah.
Because they dug a gigundous, like, football-sized pit.
Oh.
That was deep enough that if they all stood on top of each other's shoulders, they would still not be able to reach the edge. And then they dumped Snozcumbers in, and people came and looked at them like as in a zoo.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's way more, like, realistic as far as what happened IRL.
Right.
But
with the actual...
Yeah. No, I thought it was way darker to just be like, here, I'm going to dump you into the ocean, and you're now marooned onto this, I don't know, island. Now I'm thinking Scotland, and that's a whole nother, like, really awful layer
That's
of
another level.
potential
Yep.
things to work through.
Yeah.
But, I mean, how do you know they can swim? You might have just literally... You might have literally just... All of the giants known to man.
Except for the one, the good one.
The tiniest one that is least threatening.
The one that...
Until all of the other ones are gone, and then there's only this big friendly one, and then who knows, because he's still really big. I'm projecting a little bit there. But maybe there will be a BFG 2, and we'll figure out what actually happens. Doubt it. Maybe.
Does it not? Okay, so in the end of the book, there's a brief chapter that we could probably call an epilogue. That's not what it was called, but Sophie teaches him how to speak and write.
She assimilates him fully?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Proper English, and then he wrote the book.
Okay. No, like, it, interesting. I know that they're talking at the end, like, when the giants are going out, about how they've been put somewhere far, far away where you'll never have to worry about them ever again, and then... That's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was definitely telling the story, though, so that makes sense. It tracks.
There's definitely a lot of children's literature that has the central character completely unsupported by any adults. There are no adults in her life that are positive at all until she meets the queen. That's a thing in a lot of children's literature that I think more modern works that I've been reading with Everett have gone away from that a bit.
Yeah.
Like there's at least a concerned adult somewhere in the wings, but I understand the need to, as a writer, your kids have to be able to go on adventures and get into tough spots, so you can't really have, that's hard to do with parents wringing their hands in the background.
Yeah, no, I mean, they have to be removed somehow. It's just really, the whole entire situation is whitewashed. And, like, again, I hate to be the person that goes there,
right.
But it's like...
The responsibility of the creator for how they shape how people look at the material in their new rendition or their new adaptation or whatever. So it's like, yes, the base material has its coding and its context and its connotation, and then in bringing it into the now, we also recode it.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. So the choices that were made with the BFG are interesting.
So it's like, of course, this little girl and her giant friend would get help from the queen. Of course, a little British child would seek the queen as the highest authority, and she would take care of this problem for them.
Yes.
Of course. And it's hysterical and adorable, and also it is inherently problematic and speaks to a history of colonization, like,
and authoritarianism,
Yeah.
and all of the different things that have led us to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the whole point, is that it's allowed to be both. You're allowed to still have that nostalgic feeling and to explore why and to look at that. And if that changes, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's you're supposed to be growing in these social ways. Like, this is important for
You can love this book and still see how this one book is one teeny tiny little point in the broader mosaic of how it's obvious that this is a race thing, even though is everywhere in our culture and media, and we need to be aware of that so that we can change things.
So it's kind of the creator's job to sweep some of those things under the rug when you're responsible for an adaptation.
Yeah.
Because you get to help shape how people right now are absorbing this content.
Right.
So it's having a responsibility then for how people right now are viewing this thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that they shift things, like from a big pit that is an observatory essentially to we're going to dump them in the ocean, hope they can swim, and let them populate this random piece of land that you'll never go to. What? The world's only so big. There are people everywhere. Like, the whole... There's a lot.
No, it's fine. They're over there.
Yeah.
I mean, and part of that is it's a children's story.
Yes.
So they're over there and not over here, and Sophie is safe, and the day has been saved. And they all lived happily ever after.
Because there are people everywhere, and the fact that we use children's stories to erase this...
That's part of the problem. Yeah, archetypes that we set up for children shape how we think about how we deal with problems. We've formed those patterns of thinking based on the stories that we ingested as children, and it's important.
Instill all of your beliefs into your subconscious before you can even really, like, form your own thoughts. It's just how humans work.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why it is so important to be able to step back, recognize that I have this nostalgia point, and then deconstruct it for myself, because it's kind of messed up in a lot of ways that this is communicated to children as entertainment.
So I do appreciate that while I was reading the book, it felt like something that was written a long time ago. It seems like a lot of the more recent children's literature that I've read has been more in the vein of more recent like animated movies where there's not such a blatant villain that we have to defeat in order to be the victors. It's a lot more nuanced stories. I really like the tendency towards more nuanced villains that we've had in recent media, both in books and movies. Like Moana, the real villain is really Maui, who's also
the person that's supposed to be saving the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot more of that, and I really like it. I think that, I mean, obviously kids can deal with, thrive in more nuance. So I think that's great.
I mean, in a lot of ways, kids' brains are way more flexible than adult brains. So by saying, oh, well, it's not good for them to know, like, this history or that fact, like, that's a comfort thing for yourself. That's not really about another person or, like, protecting them. Like, the concept of safety is something that you have to deconstruct when you start to actually look at things like that, because what does that really mean?
So my work in writing and talking about books is twofold. First of all, I want to look at these classics and pick apart some of the problems, because I think it's really important to have these conversations, especially with kids when it happens in children's literature. And also the other side of that is to find more diverse stories to tell. With that in mind, I have a book recommendation today.
Perfect.
This book is Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, and it's by Grace Lin, and it is, I think, published in 2009, and it hits all of the notes that
I didn't really care for about the BFG. So she has loving parents, right? They are waiting in the wings, wringing their hands. She still goes on her adventure and like puts herself in danger and experiences all of the magical things that happen on her growth adventure. The villain is still a villain, but there's a lot of backstory and a lot of context, and it's just gorgeous and marvelous.
It really is. It's one of those that Jace and I have read aloud together, and he absolutely loves it. And we continue to reread. It's the kind of novel, actually, that I would really like for this author to have this space to be able to, like, outline who the best person would be to adapt this. And then I would like that adaptation to have the same accessibility, right, to Hollywood and all that means as, like, Spielberg did to be able to do the BFG.
Oh, so we want, like, a really big budget, like, Asian American production of Where the Mountain Meets the Moon.
Right, which is a classic telling. I mean, Graceland does a beautiful job in her rendition of it, and I would love for that kind of thing to have the space to exist on a scale, right, that something like the BFG has.
With the dragon?
Exactly!
It could be so good.
Even the monkeys, it
could be so
would
good.
Be a really, really fun, engaging story that I wouldn't have to pull myself out of and look at from different perspectives in a way that makes me as uncomfortable as something like the BFG did.
Right.
I think that would be valuable entertainment that everyone would enjoy.
I'm happy to have this on my bookshelf, and we regularly reread it as well because it's wonderful.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
So as far as the BFG, it was definitely entertaining, but it was essential for me to really look at the nostalgia that was coming up. And as far as, like, entertaining, yes, absolutely, but I can't really say, oh, just go be entertained by this, because there's a lot there that really does need to be kind of deconstructed or unpacked. So
I didn't have nostalgia for it because I never really read much Roald Dahl and had never read the BFG before, and so I see the entertainment value. I think especially kids who are just beginning to read chapter books,
I think it would be a fun one for you to do a study guide for.
Yeah.
So that you have ideas and ways to prompt parents so that when they are wanting to have those discussions, it's not so very uncomfortable because you feel like you're all alone with how to have that conversation.
You know, that's something that it's likely that I will work on, because there's a bunch we didn't even get into the stuff about gender.
No, I mean, and that's it. All kind of ties back to this is very much a white fairy tale
from the early 80s.
The early 80s. Yep.
Yeah. So that being said, what do you, our listeners, like to read with your kids? What do you have a favorite classic, whether it's problematic or not, or maybe a new book that you absolutely love? Why don't you share with us what you're reading in our Facebook group?
See you there.
Thanks for listening. You can join the conversation in our Facebook group. The page, facebook.com/realbooked, will direct you there.
If you want to support us and get more content, find us on Patreon. And you can always email us directly at realbooked@gmail.com. There will be links in the transcript.
All music in this episode provided by purple-planet.com.
Hope we hear from you soon.